Hello YouTube, this is my first win. I'm Ninja Bear once again. My first win against a Masters on Lichess or a titled master who has made my day a little bit. This happened yesterday. We'll go ahead and get started. This is a Closed Sicilian with a G6 line. It is an old school line that we have, where typically a closed Sicilian is whenever you go for knight to c3 on move 2. So g6 and d4. This line right here can invoke a lot of different possibilities. We have typically, of course, that is, in my opinion, that is played is a line that is interesting, bishop to g7 immediately, where you can play against a tripled pawn structure where white is up a pawn but with tripled pawns. However, this structure, of course, has probably fallen out of favor in other people's books and other people's lines, as white is up a pawn and black has a cramped pawn structure in space. So this line I'm not going to analyze, of course. I'm just going to go over the game where we have pawn takes, queen takes, and rightly so to defend. Knight comes to c6, f6. And in order for the continuation of this line to maintain a little bit of a small advantage, the engine, of course, recommends bishop to e3 here. I personally think that this is a good move, and probably best to prepare to castle, where we can then move our queen out of the way with a move like knight c6 that's going to be happening soon. So that is not what I played. I ended up playing for a tricky little line, which gives a minus 0.9 evaluation. That evaluation is a little bit crazy, because afterward we can see that the knight recommended move, then the queen moves. We are making a bunch of moves with our queen, but we have to get it out of harm's way, and we have to keep our central control. I'm actually a former Scandinavian player, and I typically play Scandinavian every now and then with the knight f6 line. That's typically what I do on some blitz games, just to have some fun. I don't know all the lines, of course, but maybe one day I'll post up a video as far as the Scandinavian defense that I won, or that was a really good game. From here, there is central control, but white is neglecting development. So as far as the development goes, black should play bishop to g7 as recommended. I think personally here is the best move, or a really good move. The alternate move that my opponent played was to put pressure on this pawn, and the engine recommends immediately to defend by blocking, of course, the attack and putting pressure if black takes the queen on the c7 square, with white taking with the knight. This is not what happened. I played f4 to lock it down, and this was a slight mistake, as giving a little bit of advantage of development once again to black in being able to lock it down. Like I said, once again, I'm neglecting development. This is the point of my analysis, is to make fun of myself, not make fun of myself necessarily, but to criticize my moves and to learn how to play chess a little bit better, especially through the opening. Black makes I would say this is a mistake, as he should have developed another piece, but he was worried about getting his knight trapped, and didn't see that he can move his knight back there after I moved to g4. After I moved to g4, or once I moved g4, he can move his knight to g7 back with his bishop on h6, And I haven't even committed with g4. That's another thing. So I play the rightfully so move here, bishop to d2, which comes with a discovery attack on the queen and can be menacing. The recommended move, of course, is for the knight to move and to ignore this threat, with the queen most likely moving back to d8, which would get the queen out of harm's way. But my plan is going to be to castle queenside. And from here, I want to go over this little tactical line. I didn't really calculate moving out my bishop here, but it is not recommended to take this pawn. Taking this pawn leads to basically the rook being taken by the queen, because if so, a rook is going to be lost. Queen moves out, and the queen is going to be trapped through the whole entire game. Boom, boom, boom. And who would have actually seen this line? This line could have been played, and we could have seen a nice little, like, if the queen moves out, okay, mate and 7, mate and 6. And this right here is a completely just line that I wouldn't have seen over a 10-minute game, and possibly, of course, would have just taken away. That's why Stockfish on this engine is rated about 2600, which means if you can beat it at this level, you can be a pretty darn good chess player. So 2600 is nothing to scoff about. So I didn't play that. I ended up castling here, castles, and rightfully so. Actually, now that the queen was able to be defended and moved away, I should have moved the queen out. Given that I now have pretty much an advantage in space, and I have the ability to maneuver my pieces. Now, black can't take this pawn. And can you see why? If black takes this pawn on f4, there is an in-between move that gets the queen out the way. So the queen has to move, and the queen can't move to anywhere to guard the knight, and the knight is taken. So this would have been probably the best move I see in the position now. But I did not play that. I ended up playing to scare away the queen and entice black to take, which he rightfully does so. And we have a position where black is trying to get his development in. I simply defend my pawn that's double attacked. And I'm going for, now that there's castling, an attack with h4. H4 followed by h5 was my plan. However, I also had eyes on the g2 diagonal, so a little bit conflicting. But also, if you note that my bishop, once moved, will be my black bishop will end up attacking black's d7 pawn if black decides to fianchetto, which he does. So I decide to fianchetto, and rightfully so, he's going to be giving away defense against that pawn. So in order to take advantage of this, I should have played h5 to try to get some activity going on against the king side. But I had a plan, and that was to immediately get rid of the e6 knight that I thought was adequately posted and I can open up the diagonal for my bishop. So this wasn't a bad plan. Overall, it does give up 0.3, which it looks like it's a slight issue, but still overall holding an advantage. So yeah, as we can see, a slight advantage still is to white after further analysis by the computer. Here's where the mistake was made, and I have an interesting tactic that ends up popping up after I make the bishop to c3 move. Bishop to c3, knight to here, and then rook takes. Rook takes ends up winning 2 pieces for a rook, because as you can see, rook is going to go ahead and take, and the bishop's going to go ahead and take. Although I gave my respect to the master that this might be a little bit misleading, because I'm going to give up a rook for 2 pieces and a pawn, the g3 pawn, and it's going to come with a tempo on my rook. So I instead decided to invest upon defending my pawn first, which basically gives a little bit of the advantage back up, as you can see, because the knight is going to be defended by the other rook once it's taken. So no longer is this tactic going to be available. So I did end up winning a clear pawn, but the clear pawn makes my position somewhat rocky. Now, here once again, I have tactics. The tactics that I saw were that we're going to have to take the knight no matter what. We can't take the bishop because we're going to have it the in-between move, knight takes knight, which is going to come with check. And there's no way to take that back. So we have to play knight takes knight the way that this goes for this tactical line. And recommended is for the bishop to take, which the bishop takes. And I play, which is probably the correct move, knight takes knight. And his take of the piece, and I probably should have considered taking the piece because I was going to be able to have a sweet discovered attack on the king with the diagonal on the A1 H8 diagonal if I leave my knight available. We'll just see this line right here. All right, the knight takes is recommended. Taking the knight is recommended, and then moving my rook, which I could have moved it here, I could have moved it here, or anywhere else, just to get out of the way. And then we have less bishops of opposite colors, but it's a solid position for me because I'm going to have this diagonal, like I said, once again, available. So that's not what happened in the game. If bishop takes, we have this tactic right here, which that was the mate in 8, which I did not see there was a mate in 8. We can go ahead and briefly go through the mate in 8. King moves, check. This looks pretty much forced. Has to take, or has to move to defend, takes. And anything else that happens, we're trying to make loof for the king, check. And we're going to go ahead and promote queens. And this is defended and taking the rook, making a little bit whatever room, and we're checkmated. Now, of course, that wasn't all forced, but I did not see a mate in 8. The position that I saw was around that position that would have been, I thought, slightly more winning, but I did not see that. I ended up making things simple, what I thought was simple, After takes, move the rook out of the way, and take a pawn with check to get my knight out of the way. Takes, and now I'm up 2 pawns. I just played simple chess. If he doesn't move, we do have bishops of opposite colors. So one of the things that I might run into is potential draw scenario. But like I said, once again, I was playing a Masters, so I was kind of happy with a draw, just to get a draw out of the Masters. So from here, recommended lines, I did not take. I should have just went ahead and take the pawn like the second suggestion was. And from here, he's threatening checkmate. There's a couple of defenses, but I'm up material. Even though it's bishops of opposite colors, I'm up 3 pawns. I decide to try to trade down some pieces, and we get to a point that now my bishop's pinned. And from here, the position just gets solid, and I decide to make a move that was probably subpar because we were at bishops of opposite colors. I was going to go after this pawn. We could have traded rooks here, which would have been fine, but the way I looked at it is I was going to win a 4th pawn by if takes, I was going to win a 4th pawn by here. And even though it might not have been the healthiest of 4th pawns, it is still a passed pawn, and now I have 3 passed pawns getting into the way, potentially crushing for a winning victory. That was my plan. So he did not move there. He moved here to E2, and he's going to go after my G pawn. So I take his pawn. He takes my pawn eventually, 1 move later. And then I'm going to push. My plan is to push, move rook to B8, and we're going to seal the deal with the game. Now, this is the intermezzo move that I made here to lock in the victory, which was check, king moves, which I'll go ahead and make the next move. And can you see where I move next? And you can pause the video if you want. That's a small little tactic to be able to progress forward. So I moved bishop here, and from here it's pretty much game over. There's nothing black can do. Black can potentially move his king out of the way, and he's going to have to give up the bishop now, no matter what. And of course, being up solid 3 pawns is going to win you every time. So taking more material than what's necessary, of course, with bishops of opposite colors, is what's going to go ahead and make you solid in the games for winning these games. So that's not what happened here. I ended up queening, or I did not end up queening. I got to a point that I was going to queen, and it was game over. He resigned. So thanks so much for viewing the video. If you liked my in-depth analysis, I will post up more. If I get 1 view, I will post up another one tomorrow. Hopefully, of course, we'll see what games, of course, by other masters, of course, that I can go ahead and possibly beat. Of course, masters are humans. They are people too, so they do make mistakes. That is one thing as far as growing your chess skills that you have to realize when you're playing. And I personally think that this is one of those games that I've gone over a couple of times just to realize, like I said, where I can improve in my game. Going over your won games is sometimes just as beneficial as going over your lost games, because you can look at where you can improve better or where you can improve more at through just simple analysis with tools like the engine, of course, to just see if you missed anything tactically, to kind of go over like why this next move is possibly better. And if you think that you're fine with an equal position coming out against a stronger opponent, but it's an easier to play position, then that's something that personally I personally would rather take an easy position draw against a FIDE master or IM that I'm playing, which of course I probably won't play against a grandmaster for a while, depending on where I go in the next couple of months on my rating and with the studying that I've been doing. But I would rather take an easy position draw, that's me personally, than taking a complex position, double-edged position, because that double-edged position, I'm going to get sunk on time every single time. That's just me personally. I'm not a big, like I said, although I plan on downloading a chess.com app and making a new account here soon, a big Puzzle Rush player, but I plan on starting to try to do some of the Puzzle Rushes and maybe getting that Diamond membership and moving forward with that, just to see if I can get better on my speed. So that's something to consider when looking at your games. Look at your won games as well. See if you could have did anything better. See if you could have had a positional advantage or missed something that was just a complete blunder. That was possibly, like I went over with the earlier through the thing, as far as I'm mating 7, mating 8, I believe. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.